Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for making it here very early in the morning.
You need to open the mic for the live stream.
Morning.
Just like this.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for making it here in the early morning on the almost at the very end of very busy 2 weeks. I think people are starting to run out of energy. We will be following the rules of the silent session, so need to be using the headsets. I was told. Also because, we'll be using the microphones because we're planning to live stream the session and then have a YouTube recording. So for that purpose, we would need that. My name is Nina Kolobashkina. I lead gender and social inclusion work at the Climate Investment Funds. And the purpose of this session is really to hear from some of our most important key stakeholders as we embark on a journey to revise and develop our new gender and social inclusion strategy. We're in the very early stages, so we don't have anything prepared on it, but we have some ideas, and I think this is how we lined up the panel of speakers. But it's very important panel in a sense that we were thinking that those are the people or the organizations that really inspire us in a sense in the direction that we need to be pursuing in answering kind of the main questions that we want to answer in the strategy. And but this is a consultation. We have some colleagues in the audience, and please also be ready to provide some interventions and inputs. We're hoping to get some colleagues from the UNFCCC gender team who are engaged in the negotiations on the gender action plan of the UNFCCC. They're busy with some formal meetings right now, but they are trying to come towards the end of the session and share some reflections, because obviously we are also trying to align our planning for our gender and social inclusion work to what is happening within the broader consultations. I wanted to start with just three slides to kind of set the scene. I think most of the people in the room know about climate investment funds, but just maybe 2 sentences of an introduction. So we are one of the multilateral climate funds. This pavilion we share with our brother or sister funds, such as Adaptation Fund, Green Climate Fund, and Global Environment Facility. And in the course of the last 2 weeks, we're doing a lot of joint events. We're doing a joint event on gender tomorrow. And for the strategy, we're also consulting with them very closely and trying to really align our approaches. The CIF was established in 2008 and has over $12 billion in concessional finance. We are a fund that really pushes for innovation in both mitigation and adaptation space, and also innovation in finance. Last week, we've listed our CCNM capital markets mechanism on the London Stock Exchange, becoming the first kind of multilateral climate fund that actually reaches out to bring in even more private capital using the bilateral development finance and trying to multiply it to increase the investments in the low and middle income countries. We work in over 80 countries and have over 400 projects. So within that, we try to make sure that the focus on gender is quite strong. If I can have maybe our first slide, over 10 years ago, we've launched our gender action plans and introduced requirements. This was also aligned to the Lima work program. And right now we're going through an evaluation of the 10 years of how it worked. Also in the last few years, increasingly, we started to do a lot of work on different aspects of social inclusion. We've done some work on Indigenous people, especially through our stakeholder engagement team. We've been doing some work on youth. Last week, we've launched another cohort of our youth fellows. Additionally, in the last 2 years, with particular support from our colleagues from UK, we were pushing a lot the agenda on disability inclusion. We've launched a number of joint knowledge products, working very closely with the World Bank that is doing a lot of knowledge work in that respect. Tomorrow we have a session where we're doing consultations with organizations of persons with disabilities as well. So within that, and of course, just transition is a subject that that we've also been very engaged. We were one of the first players to start engaging the knowledge field and then applying it practically. Especially within the context of the accelerated coal transition program that was launched a few years ago. So part of our work, and now we just got our UNFCCC colleagues joining as well. So it's really a full house of our most important stakeholders. With all of that, we started to reflect, how to really balance the focus on gender and the work that really still needs to be done. And when we were reflecting, part of our evaluation, we realized that 10 years ago, when we were starting to work on gender inclusion, we've managed to do gender-informed approaches. We've started with including some gender requirements, putting some gender targets. If we look at our old projects, especially in mitigation space, that's all we can find. But we have increasingly both in terms of where we set the standards, but also now seeing a lot of results from the projects in terms of gender responsive approaches as well, where we aim to increase access to markets, to land resources and services for both genders, and doing really targeted and dedicated analysis on that. And over the past years, in line with the broader knowledge work that CIF been doing on transformative change, and we've been one of the kind of also drivers and a lot of knowledge and consultations in that broader space on transformative change. We've started to look at gender transformative approach. Last year, we published a report on women climate leadership, a diagnostic tool which we are now trying to apply in all of our investment plans and projects. When I was introducing the CIF, so I've mentioned that we are one of the 4 funds. What makes us a little bit different from the others is that we work exclusively with the MDBs, which means we also work with larger scale projects. Where we add specific value is our programmatic approach. So through our programs, we engage with the countries. We then work through the process of an investment plan preparation, where we bring together the several MDBs that work in the country, together with the national stakeholders, to really, rather than thinking of kind of specific projects, to think more programmatically over a course of 5-10 years of when this program will be implemented in the country, how different projects and how, the work of the International Finance Corporation that is focusing on the private sector, and the work of the African Development Bank that works on both sides with the private sector and the government, how it will all complement each other and drive change that is more than the whole becomes more than the sum of the parts. And within that context, we've now introduced very strong requirements on both on gender and stakeholder engagement and consultations and analysis. And we're applying our Women Climate Leadership Diagnostic tool to see, how can we be more radical? How can we go beyond just access to really start looking at some structural, institutional, normative barriers to equality, and identify opportunities for structural reforms, governance, voice, and agency. So this is our vision that we're still working on. And if I can maybe have this next slide with our questions. So for the consultation, we wanted to kind of throw 3 main themes that we're grappling with and trying to figure out. First is strategic priorities. So what thematic areas should we focus on? How do we work towards inclusion of various marginalized groups? And what programming interventions can we deploy to deliver on strategic priorities? So this is kind of the what should be the themes. And here, some of the kind of ongoing conversation we have is how to really balance, advance and expand focus on various marginalized groups without compromising on the need to take very decisive action on gender equality and move towards really gender transformative interventions. We don't have the answers yet, so any ideas of how do you see that balance would be very appreciated. So the second one is really, what do we mean by gender transformative? What goals should we set in terms of advancing specifically women leadership? This has been on the agenda. I think in the last few years, more and more voices are heard that this should really be a priority. We should stop thinking about women as just beneficiaries or adversely impacted by the climate change, but how do we bring them into the positions of power at all levels, from kind of local water user associations to the climate negotiations, and what do we do to support that through the sectoral programs that we're implementing, and then how can we better build partnerships? So one of the pieces of work that we've been doing over the past year is developing partnerships with women organizations such as Vital Voices, such as BOCAN, trying to see how can we really use those loud voices and bring them closer to the investment projects, and both kind of a global advocacy, but also a country-specific work. And finally, another theme that is very important, all of this is great, setting the standards, but how do we hold ourselves accountable? Who can hold us accountable? How do we bring the CSOs to bring us accountable? And what KPIs, what indicators should we put in place? We're pushing for including mandatory requirements, and this is the third important question for the consultation. So with that, we are, as I said, basically going to start going around the table and sharing some perspectives from, as CIF has a very participatory governance structure. So our trust fund committee consists of the representatives of the donor countries, of the recipient countries. We also have our MDBs as part of the trust fund committee, and then civil society organizations. So that's how we try to structure the consultation a little bit as well. And I am very happy to give the floor to Jared Hove, who is the Deputy Director of the Adaptation and Resilience Department at the UK Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, to share some ideas with us. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Nina, and thank you for inviting us today. Just an aside, actually, I sit on the board for the Fund for Responding to Loss and Damage. So I'm presuming next year we better get ourselves a logo and get ourselves sorted. So we will be joining you here. So that's going to be great. Thank you for inviting us today. I was trying to think about what would be useful for people to hear, and I could talk about UK commitment to CIFs and all those sorts of things, but I think I'm going to take that as granted. I thought what might be useful is to hear three things. One is about UK commitment. One is about ambition for the CIFs in this case and our colleagues, and one is about how we want to work going forward. So just to sort of underscore those, and I'll be brief because there's some brilliant speakers here. One is just to underscore the UK commitment to gender equality and women's empowerment and the intersection with climate and nature. So we've had a set of UK ministers here over the last couple of weeks. And Annalise Dodds, who is our UK Minister for Development, our UK Minister responsible for climate, and domestically, our UK Minister for Women and Equalities, has been really clear on two things: that gender equality and women's rights will be at the heart of everything that FCDO does going forwards, and that climate and nature will be at the heart of everything we do. So we have a tremendous opportunity. We have a new administration with energy wanting to re-establish the UK's leadership on this piece. Secondly is that our commitment is for the long term. And we want to think long term. We know that achieving the sort of change that everyone in this room, and I hope listening, is committed to, takes time. And that means sticking with it, being persistent, and really working to make the best of our systems. Thirdly, and I think this is a really important interface, and Nina, you've already talked about this a little bit, is a commitment to scale, right? And that's absolutely true when we're thinking about gender equality. It's also absolutely true when we're talking about climate and nature. If you are not thinking about how you can contribute towards scale in our positions, then you're perhaps in the wrong business, right? So I think that's going to be really important. Fourthly is a commitment to moving, as you've said, to the right of that diagram, of recognizing we have a responsibility when working on climate and nature to be changing systems, institutions, norms and structures for permanent solutions towards gender equality and women's rights. It is not good enough to be taking, as a colleague said earlier on today, a gender lens approach. We have to take a gender transformative approach, and we have an absolute responsibility to do that. That should be the norm, and any departures from the norm should be something that we challenge ourselves on. And finally, a commitment to thinking about whole systems approach. So UK government FCDO wants to think root and branch through the organisation, not how we can have a perfect gender equality unit or a perfect small intersection of gender equality and climate. So that's important. Secondly, a commitment to be ambitious for you, in a sense, right? So for those organizations with whom we are a shareholder, a partner, a major contributor, we want to hold a very high level of ambition for you. And that ambition really should be about how you set your ambition, how you deliver that ambition, and as you've said, how you are accountable for that ambition throughout your delivery chain. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Eleanor and Robin later on about how that ambition is articulated. And we have an ambition for you also to be collective in how you are operating. So we want our partners to be working together, not separately on that. And I don't think we should be apologetic for that ambition. We also have an ambition to support people within the organization to help change the organization and think about the norms and structures in our multilateral partners and climate fund partners. So yeah, we will continue to hold that ambition, and you can expect us to. And we also have an ambition that you understand the distribution of risk and opportunity in the interface of gender equality and climate and nature and what you do. And I think that speaks to climate justice more broadly, but also it speaks to having excellent monitoring evaluation systems that are qualitative, quantitative, and that add up. And then finally, I think you can expect us to be committed to partnership, and I hope to a degree of humility in that partnership. So, you know, when we ask organizations and WROs what they want from organizations like us, probably the first thing is to listen. And so I think you have a commitment that we should be listening to women's rights organizations, but also listening to our partners in terms of how they're progressing with that struggle. A commitment to learning. So we want to invest in monitoring and evaluation and moving that forward. And a commitment to changing our own practice and our own arguments as others show us a better way of doing things and inspire and challenge and hold us accountable as well. So I think that's what we want to be trying to do in this space, but we really want to be working collectively to achieve the sorts of ambition you're setting out. And we have very high ambitions for you in the climate funds and climate investment funds. Thank you, Nina.
So much. I think we're going to be passing the mic. So I think that was a great scene setting presentation. And now I wanted to hand over to Robin. Robin, as the global director for social development for the World Bank, and World Bank being one of our largest implementing partners for delivering CIF's projects. And you recently took the position as the global director for social. What is the vision from your perspective? What are the key priorities that you see for the nexus between the social development and climate finance? And also, you know, in the World Bank experience, beyond its focus on women, what other socially excluded groups require targeted interventions in that nexus? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nina, for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be sharing the panel with a very distinguished set of colleagues. So let me, the World Bank Group has a new gender strategy, and social development within the World Bank, we tend to work across all of the practices, including social protection and labor, where Lowly works, and all other global practices to try to operationalize the gender strategy. And of course, climate action is an increasingly central and crucial area of engagement across virtually all of our work. So what I wanted to do is maybe just highlight, and so within that, of course, gender transformative action in climate action, in the deployment of climate finance is obviously a critical and crucial area of action. I think the climate investment funds have already played a very important catalytic role in piloting and rolling out a lot of work that's been quite path-breaking and helps set a course that the World Bank and, of course, other MDBs can help to take to scale. As Jared was highlighting, I think getting to scale is crucial in this area. I wanted to just highlight maybe 4 buckets of issues that I think are ways in which we need to think about the nexus of social development and gender transformative action in particular, and climate action. The first is around locally led action, putting decisions and resources into the hands of communities, and being very careful to distinguish the gender dimensions of who takes action, who prioritizes investments, who exercises leadership, and so forth. And we have quite a bit of experience in this space, but there's a lot more that's needed. In fact, Jared and I were just in a conversation around this just preceding this session. Now, the pilot program for climate resilience, which has ended now, but that was one of the earlier funds under the climate investment funds, I think actually did some really pioneering work in this area. For a while, I was responsible for the Zambia PPCR program, and that was an excellent example of locally led climate action with a very strong gender transformative focus in the Barotse sub-basin of the Zambezi and Western Zambia. A lot of investments around the management of water resources, multi-purpose canals that are used for irrigation, for drainage, for transport, and of course for livelihoods, and women-led initiatives under the PPCR, I think were transformative and led to quite a lot of change, women stepping up as local leaders in a political sense as well within their communities. Related to that on locally led action, I think is that Jared mentioned the fund for responding to loss and damage. So a lot of the locally led climate action that's needed is anticipatory investments in building resilience at the community level, but it's also developing mechanisms for gender-aware responses when major climate hazards hit. We saw this, for example, in Pakistan when the floods hit a couple of years ago, and some of the rebuilding efforts in, for example, housing reconstruction really was done with paying very close attention to social inclusion, including people with disabilities. Simple steps like using tactile paving, training local artisans to actually use inclusive building techniques in order to promote social inclusion outcomes. We saw the same in Nepal earthquake response, training artisans in the use of tactile paving and so forth. But the gender dimensions of this absolutely central. Second bucket would be around just transition, transitions out of coal. And the CIF, of course, has the Accelerating Coal Transition Program. And within that, the Women-Led Coal Transition Program, WOLCOT. So, the World Bank is implementing or partnering with other MDBs, particularly in South Africa and Indonesia, in the implementation of these WOLCOT grants. Related to this, I think some of the other experiences, Turkey has a new program, the Socially Inclusive Just Transition Program, with a very strong emphasis on women and youth in terms of access to economic opportunities through micro and small enterprises. So paying attention to these aspects of the transition out of coal, I think, is key. Another good example would be the Nigeria for Women project, really engaging at scale in promoting economic livelihoods for women, but building into that a climate resilience focus in terms of livelihood support. A third bucket that I'd like to highlight is really engagement around the role that indigenous peoples and local communities can play in safeguarding, securing forest carbon sinks, and playing a critical role, for example, in relation to the voluntary carbon markets. Again, gender, paying attention to who exercises leadership, which organizations are actually engaging, direct financing of women-led organizations within indigenous peoples and local civil society organizations, I would think is a key dimension. We need to be thinking of all groups that risk being vulnerable, marginalized and disadvantaged in the process. And then a final bucket is around accountability in the use of climate finance. We have something under the Global Program for Social Accountability, which is actually ending the last remaining funding under that. We've set up something called the Green Accountability Platform that we're, and it's actually a consortium of organizations that is managing this, World Resources Institute with the Huairou Commission and South North. And essentially they are on granting then to civil society organizations in 5 pilot countries. This is really about engaging civil society and social innovators in promoting accountability mechanisms, often using digital innovations, for example. And again, as a very strong gender dimension to that. We're hoping that this green accountability platform will serve as a proof of concept for a new facility that we're in the process of setting up called CIVIC, the Civil Society and Social Innovation Alliance. And within that, there'll be a specific, a set of thematic windows or platforms, one around climate action, one around gender equality, and obviously the two very often going hand in hand, then also youth engagement and health as 2 other priority areas. So these would be some of the, to my mind, some of the areas where I think going forwards, the CIF could continue to play a pioneering role in under those 4 buckets.
So much, Robin. That was really great and covered a very broad range of subjects. This is where we are, trying to put all of it together, that we can cover and balance focus on those multiple groups, but also understanding that they're not necessarily separate groups, that there is a lot of intersectionality and multiple identities. I really enjoyed it that you also mentioned our PPCR program, and so I'm very happy to then give the floor over to my colleague Loretta Rufo, who used to be the manager of the PPCR program at CIF and is also in the process of designing the new climate resilience program that will be coming out of the PPCR experience. So I just want you, Lori, to share some of the ideas. So based on that experience, what do you think works in prioritizing the needs of the people? And for the new climate resilience program, how do you think adopting a people-centric approach and deepening social inclusion can help address some of the most pressing climate-related challenges? Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Good morning, everyone, and I'm happy to be here to be part of this panel. I think for my intervention, I will be reiterating a lot of what Robin has mentioned in terms of what works and what really made our projects and our programs transformational. So in 2008, when the CIF was established, we also launched the program on adaptation, which is the pilot program for climate resilience. So it is a $1.2 billion financing program where we have implemented almost 100 projects in 18 countries and in through our 2 regional programs in the Caribbean and the Pacific. And what I can say about this important and transformational program is that our focus is on addressing vulnerability and building resilience in communities and addressing the issues that are being faced by the most vulnerable people. And we have implemented a number of projects on agriculture, water, food security and even infrastructures. But the ultimate objective of these programs and projects are really to address the vulnerability of communities and vulnerability of people. And so it is very targeted. It's about people, and it's very people-centered approach. And because also of the programmatic approach of the CIF and the broader stakeholder engagement, we recognize how countries were able to really address the issues at the local level in a more systemic way through the programmatic approach. So what has worked under the PPCR in prioritizing the needs of the people are basically empowering communities. That's really very important. People, the PPCR has placed vulnerable communities at the heart of its implementation. So we engage local people in planning and decision-making processes, making sure that solutions are actually tailored to meet the unique needs and conditions in communities. Gender mainstreaming and social inclusions is also a crucial elements of the success of our programs and projects. So the CIF, Nina's mentioned some of these important points during her presentation. So the gender transformative approach has enhanced gender mainstreaming and women leadership in our programs and projects. We have seen evidence that when women are empowered to participate meaningfully in decision-making processes, and advocate also for their priorities and needs, and also take on leadership roles, that's when transformational change actually happens in local communities. We have a very good example in Tajikistan where we have seen how the women are taking a big role in addressing the vulnerability issues that their family is facing. And through our work with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, they were able to work with the national development banks and intermediaries to offer climate financing for women, which actually allowed them to address some of the climate risks they were facing, and also trying to understand how they can be involved or create livelihoods in order to address those vulnerability issues. And one also other important component and element is about capacity building and also building knowledge in communities. So by providing training and providing the resources that they need, the program empowered the communities with the knowledge and skills that they actually need in order to adapt to climate change. And Robin has mentioned earlier about the importance of, I think it was Gerard who said, the importance of time, that the process of adapting to climate change is not one-off process, but a process that really takes time, and the impact could actually happen once the process and all the transformation has actually happened on the ground. And we also noted that the support for local innovation and integrating the traditional knowledge in identifying specific adaptation investments are also very important. So this turns these challenges into opportunities and also enhances the community's pride and ownership of particular activities and investments on the ground. So all these successes and all these elements have shown to deliver better impacts and transformation in communities. We have seen this in a number of our community-based projects in Cambodia, in Niger, in Nepal, in Zambia. So we saw that these things would actually also happen with the strong leadership at the national government. So the national government should have a very clear vision of where they want to go in terms of implementing locally led adaptation. So all these lessons and experience we are taking on board in the implementation of our new program. Right now, we're calling it Country Resilience Program. This time, we are doing it through two components, similar to PPCR, where the first component is about national adaptation investment planning, and the second is on financing investments that enable adaptation. One big difference of the implementation of this program is we wanted to pilot test the MCF collaboration, where we will be working with other climate funds, and hopefully when the loss and damage funds becomes operational, it will be part of this whole ecosystems approach for MCF collaboration in implementing this program. And so under component one, where we will be helping countries in designing their national adaptation investment plan, we will be developing a socially inclusive adaptation investment plan. And what we mean by that is that in the initial part of the investment planning process, we will be conducting gender and social inclusion analysis. I think Nina has touched on this during her presentation, and also explicitly targeting socially excluded group and women and girls, as well as group with heightened climate vulnerabilities. And in the actual implementation of this adaptation investments, which is part of component two, we are thinking of having a greater focus on locally led adaptation. And so we are still in the design stage of that program, where we are thinking of creating a window for locally led adaptation, and taking that opportunity also for women to be involved, not only among themselves, but having opportunities to work with the private sector and other stakeholders that could actually move the program in terms of delivering transformative action with the women as part of the whole initiative. And we will be giving priority to investment that has the potential to respond to the poor and vulnerable population through investments in health, education, social protection, livelihoods, rural development, and urban settlement transformation. And so we are really focusing on just transition. People are talking about just transition in terms of energy initiatives, energy program, but we see a lot of opportunities of just transition through adaptation interventions and adaptation investments that are done in a very programmatic way. And of course, we were talking about accountability. So under this program, gender and social inclusion monitoring and reporting will be a big part of the implementation of the program. So maybe I'll stop from there.
Thank you so much, Lori. And also now you brought the subject of MCF, the collaboration between multilateral climate funds, and how we are really trying to have a unified approach. And in that context, we wanted to then bring up the subject of adaptive social protection. Over the last 6 months, there was a task force on adaptive social protection was established, which brings the MDBs together and the climate funds to really deepen this focus. And I wanted to give the floor over to Loli Arribas-Banias, who is the practice manager for social protection and jobs in the World Bank Group. And basically, if you could just share your take and how within the social protection practice you see the focus on climate, and specifically maybe for some people to also elaborate what do you mean by adaptive social protection and kind of the vision forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's great that we kind of all converging towards the same messages. And hopefully this is an opportunity to bring the climate crowd and the social development and social protection crowds together. Maybe to start by your question, when you were saying, how do we make sure that we don't lose the focus when we bring in social inclusion, that we don't lose the focus on gender? For me, they are absolutely complementary. You might have, I don't know how many of you have heard it, but the president of the World Bank announced recently our ambition to reach 500 million beneficiaries with social protection by 2030, of which, and this is, I think, where the complementarity comes, 250 million of them have to be women. So for us, when we talk about social protection and reaching the poor and vulnerable, women are at the center. And in fact, oftentimes, they are the beneficiaries of social protection, especially of the cash transfers. So I don't think it's exclusive. I think it's absolutely complementary. One of the things that, and by the way, I think he just raised the ambition, because we were thinking 500 million starting from the base that we have, which is about 250 million out of, I don't know, $29 billion across the world. he just in a recent event say 500 million new beneficiaries, which is definitely going to require all of us to put all hands on deck to be able to do that. But if you think about it, 500 million plus 222 that we have, that's about 700 million. This is pretty much all the extreme poor, right? So it's a great ambition, but I think one that we should definitely aim for. How can we join forces? I mentioned this a couple of times and I'll reiterate it. One way in which maybe the climate funds can help is we've been arguing that social protection is absolutely critical for the adaptation agenda. We're falling behind on that. And without social protection, we will not reach the adaptation targets. We've been talking about the just transition and decarbonization. You've mentioned energy, but it's energy decarbonization, it's food systems decarbonization, it's transport decarbonization. All of this is going to have an impact on the livelihoods of the poor. And unless we think about this, it's just not going to succeed. And then, for example, the loss and damage agenda. I hope you help us put social protection and social working with the communities, etc., to deliver on the loss and damage. So one of the ways to do that is to make sure that all of these are included in the NDC commitments from the countries. The countries are about to update the NDCs. They will be putting their commitments up until 2035. If any of those interventions are not part of the NDCs, they're very likely to suffer from financing, right? So once they are in the NDCs, they will be monitored and they will be much more likely to receive the funding and the attention that they require. But we don't have access to make sure that that's happened. We have something that we call the Social Protection Interagency Coordination Board, and we have the USP, Universal Social Protection 2030. This is about 30 some institutions that include multilaterals, that includes bilaterals that work on social protection. We are all pushing for that and trying to find out who is holding the pen at the country level in drafting these NDCs commitments. But of course, you know, we kind of have a stake. So if the climate community and the climate funds can help us push that, that will be absolutely very helpful. And of course, you know, actors such as the UK, we were talking about Germany, have been very, very helpful for that. Where else can we join forces? Absolutely critical, the data and analytics, and particularly sex disaggregated data. These are global public goods, so it's not easy to find funding for that. We've been very lucky to have Gates and actually FCDO pushing for that, and we've been we have a data bank that we hold the call on social protection. It's called Aspire. We finally start to have sex disaggregated data, and it's absolutely essential to have it, because when we talk about the adaptive social protection, we're talking about something that we call the stress testing tool, making sure that it's not an afterthought, that we think about this before the shocks occur. And the question is not if they're going to occur, it's when they're going to occur. So what we're doing with this stress testing tool is to try to estimate and simulate who is going to be impacted, right? So far, we've been able to do an aggregate number. It's like these many people will be impacted from this. We need to get to much more granular than that. We need to know who they are. We need to know where they live, and we need to know what's their level of vulnerability. And this includes particularly women, right? Because the vulnerabilities of women in the household are much worse and different than those of the men, right? So for example, on the just transition, we know that more men are going to be impacted by the closing of mines, because by the nature of the sector, there are more men working there. But as we work on upskilling and reskilling and do active labor market policies to finding new jobs for the people that are going to be impacted, we know that women are falling behind, for example, in sectors such as STEM, right? So how do we make sure that we have data that allows us to then create interventions that are tailored to the specific vulnerabilities of the different people in the household, including women. So we have what we call the 3 Ts. They have to be targeted to the people that will be impacted, and those are not necessarily people that are in the social registries. And that's why we need to know who they are, where they live, and what's their level of vulnerability to include them in the social services. They have to be, as I said, targeted. They have to be tailored. And again, to be able to tailor them, we need data. And then they have to be timed in such a way that they reach these people that are going to be impacted before it is too late, before they have to resort to negative coping mechanisms such as selling assets or skipping meals, etc. So these are all global public goods, and I think we all have a collective responsibility to do that. The other way in which we can join forces is on seed funding, stimulating the demand. We were talking before about the fact that many ministers of finance, or even in some people in my own institution, see cash transfers as handouts. Well, we couldn't be farther from the truth, right? We have a lot of evidence that shows that for every dollar that you give in cash transfers, you inject in the economy $2.5, right? And it's not just about cash transfers, it's about livelihoods, it's about access to economic opportunities, especially for women. It's about providing them with access to assets, and then using those assets for economic activity. The third thing is, so we use this seed funding to test innovations, and then we can use World Bank lending to scale up those innovations, which is something that you've also mentioned. Not only to scale up, but also to build systems for future shock preparedness. And then the last one is about convening. I've mentioned Social Protection Interagency Coordination Board. These are all the actors that work on social protection. To me, it feels when we talk to one another as if we are preaching to the converted. We need to bring in, for example, the Minister of Finance. We at the World Bank, this is our counterpart. We can actually, and they have the biggest muscle, right? So how do we bring the ministers of finance? How do we bring all of the sectors together with the people sectors? How do we bring the climate funds? And in the case of the World Bank, we have what we call the class. It's core learning and I forgot, core learning and something solution. So basically these are core courses to do technical assistance to countries. And we've had one in Rome where we had 80 people, 80 representatives from 80 countries on adaptive social protection. We have an upcoming one in Kigali on economic inclusion with a strong focus on women. We have one in Riyadh in February on women, on youth employment and women employment. And what we see is that countries that can afford it join, but they're not necessarily the ones that need it the most. So how do we join forces to make sure that everybody that needs to be there is actually there? So let me stop here. If we have time, I will add about our strategy on social protection.
Perfect. No, I think that was fascinating. And I think this is precisely the point of this conversation and where we're trying to get with the strategies. Usually, you know, there are sectoral approaches. We do tend to think in silos, work in silos, go deeper, and really bringing climate people together with people who work on social protection, social development, but also bringing the CSO voices. And I think this is where we want to mix it up now and actually move on to women who work more on the ground. And I think the contribution from Cecile Bibiani Njabet, I hope I got it right, the president and founder of the African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests, and also with Volkan, to talk a little bit more about the really community work and work related to forestry that is being implemented by your organization, but also by the Vulcan's vision on the W standard and working in the space of the carbon markets. I think Robin alluded to that subject already in his presentation, but you will provide the real substance of how it works on the ground. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invitation. I think I've learned a lot already on the implementation of the gender. Of the gender strategic plan of the World Bank and all these programs that are in, I'm really like, oh, things are moving, and I hope we are on the way. Yeah, but from my own side, from my own context and perspectives, I think we still have a lot of challenges to get access to all what I have heard now. First of all, I'm from Africa, I'm from Cameroon, but I'm coordinating a network of women in 20 countries. And we are working with rural women. We are really on the ground. And what we are facing, first of all, is lack of information. We are not even informed about all what is going on. Why? Because in our own context, sometimes we don't have access to internet, we don't have access to, and most of the communication now is going online, where those who are in the villages don't have that access, that technology. And the second one is also what we call the fund itself. Funding are big, big amount. And most of the time they say we can't access those such a big amount because maybe we don't provide sufficient guarantee that we can make it, we can implement. So how can we get women, as you were saying, women are almost everywhere now, but how can we get them accessing all these funds, those who are making things happen on the ground? This is an issue. We are a network of 20 countries. We don't have access to those funding. How about the communities themselves, women on the ground, those who are in the villages? How can they get access? And we are always targeted as a risky group, So no one really wants to get us in because we don't show any convince capacities that we can make it, we can make things move. I think this is something we really have to see. What I can also share here, and which is very important, is the cultural barrier are there. That is true. But the negative impact of climate change now, it's making things happen differently. Men and women are experiencing very hard conditions, and they are now about moving together. We have a few initiatives in a few countries where we are working. We started focusing on women, but today we have put it men, because now it becomes like a wife and husband, and we can see a very, very good move towards balancing things and also getting a little bit more access to decision making for those women. So I think culture is there and it's difficult to arrange or to change. We will not work on that, but I think we have to look for ways how to channel the funding directly to those who are in need. And so far, very, very little is done. Yeah, maybe the next challenge or the last one will be, I put it here. Yeah, CIF, the CIF itself, it's perceived like a government thing. I'm a bit surprised to know that now we are talking about civil society and communities led, but for us, when we are talking about CIF, it means you have to go to the government, and that link is not established. So CIF we are outside the scene. something that we really need to see how we can improve that also, to make sure, because those who are working are the youth, are women, are all what we have seen on the ground. It does a civil society organization making things happen. And now how can the CIF develop this partnership with civil society, women, or and the state government? Because so far in most of our country, the CIF fund are for government. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. For this comment, Cecile, and I think it's really important for us, and this is why we're trying to mix up this conversation to bring the perspectives of those who really work on the ground. And within CIF, I mean, we work through the multilateral development banks. They work with the governments and the private sector, but we have been experimenting with the more direct access. One of the kind of the jewel in the crown in the past projects has been the direct grant mechanism implemented by the World Bank within the forestry investment program, working with indigenous people organizations, where then they make decisions on grant allocations. And this is exactly what we're trying to develop with the women-led coal transitions, women-led coal transitions under the Act. And I'm looking at Andrew from Canada, who is Canada is providing resources for that, and also, you know, like trying to experiment, and I think Loli was talking about that as well, that the need for that grant funding to experiment with different models and find ways of how can we reach the local organizations directly. It's not easy. It's not in the DNA of the MDBs. It's work in progress, and we do need more resources and grant resources. And one of the, I mean, beyond development partners, we're also looking at how can we bring some philanthropy money, and how can we partner with NGOs to work on that together, where maybe it's going to be parallel funding. It does not have to flow through the MDBs, but how do we bring the civil society organizations to work more closely aligned with our investment plans and implementation of our projects? And on that note, I wanted to give the floor over to Hafsat Abilola, who leads the climate justice program within the Vital Voices. In addition to that, she wears many different hats and does a lot of global advocacy work. And we wanted to hear more kind of your perspective on bringing the voices of women much stronger, but also the idea of kind of reaching civil society organizations and building those bridges between development partners, between MDVs and organizations that represent women on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina. I wanted to say that it's just been such a pleasure listening to everyone that has spoken, because I have to endorse what Cecile was saying, that when we hear about organizations that have $12 billion under management, you don't think of human beings. You think of maybe superhuman beings, and you're incredibly intimidated. And then you meet the people involved, like Nina, and how warm you've always been in all interactions with us. You can't imagine how much we value that. Every time that we talk to Nina, she's always having ideas what we can do together, how we can build together. Nina, I feel a little bit emotional. I'm sorry, but it's really priceless for us, you know, because we are actually working with, we have, and Vital Voice is not even a small organization. Vital Voices has 46,000 members in 168 countries. And we have some of the most powerful women, you know, women like Hillary Clinton. She was one of the founders of Vital Voices when she was First Lady in the United States. You can't imagine the level of power in our network. We have women like Susanna Mohammed, who is a Minister of Environment in Colombia. We have Marina, who was the first, she's sitting right there, from Russia. She set up the domestic violence hotline in Russia, the first ever, decades ago. And she's worked with the Russian government to address domestic violence issues. You know, we have women like Julie, who was 20 years working with National Resource Development Defense Council in the United States and globally. You know, so we have real powerhouses, But I have to say that these big organizations like you represent are still so intimidating to us. I remember one time Hillary Clinton was talking about the parking lot of banks. And she said that that's the graveyard of many women entrepreneurs because they go to that bank with a dream, what they want to build, the business they have in mind, only to be rejected because women are all so often rejected. And then they come to that parking lot to bury that dream. You know, and we have to think together, Nina, we have to think together with all your partners. How do we help women so that they're not burying dreams, but they are planting seeds and growing them? Because the climate safe world that we want to build depends on women. And yet, you know, in spite of the work that you are all doing, you with your 1.2 billion of the money on adaptation and resilience, that you're making sure women are participating in Tajikistan, in Pakistan, and all over, and having their voices heard and getting some of those resources, you are the minority. And that's the fact. Because 0.2% of philanthropic dollars is going to women and girl-led environmental projects, and 2% of all climate finance is going to this group of people. And then if you even look at renewable energy, where we know for a fact that Africa must grow in a green way because the planet, we're already reaching its boundaries of what it can absorb of carbon. But we also know that 600 million people in Africa are without electricity and need electricity. You would think that a lot of the renewable energy financing is going to Africa, but only 2% of that is going to Africa. So my request to you, Nina, and your whole community of supporters is really, how can we work with our 46,000 incredibly powerful, incredibly tested women in our Vital Voices network, and women like Cecile and other many indigenous women who are protecting the rainforests across Africa, in the Amazon, around the world? How do we work with you guys to crowd in the philanthropic money, to begin to give the signals to the general climate finance money so that this money becomes available to the women at the local level? I want to close really by saying to you that there are women in Africa that have been championing this issue, and many of them are no longer with us. And I want to put on the table Wangari Maathai. She, from Kenya, was the first PhD. She got her PhD in the United States, didn't stay in the United States, even though you can imagine that the career opportunities are much better even then. She went back to Kenya to defend the rainforest of Kenya. But when you're trying to stop the government and the private sector from cutting down trees, you are not loved. Nobody is going to treat you like a hero. Nobody's going to lift you up. You are actually many times endangered. You know, you get harassed, you get attacked. But she was so valiant and she trusted her instincts. She knew that the earth was suffering and that communities were suffering with deforestation. And so she defended the rainforest. When she was a member of government in the cabinet as a junior minister for environment, that woman should never have been a junior minister for environment, but we can see what patriarchy can do sometimes. No problem, she had a seat at the table. She was vilified and attacked by the president of our country throughout our time as junior minister, to the point that after a while she developed cancer and then she died. My colleague, a friend of mine, was telling me that in the first meeting of cabinet after she died, nobody spoke. They were so ashamed that the cold treatment that they had accorded that woman for defending the rainforest had probably been one of the things that had triggered maybe stress, who knows, but she lost her life. We're even lucky that her story wasn't that she was gunned down. Some are gunned down, some are just killed. But what I'm saying is that the women in our network and women like Cecile, women at the grassroots level, will do whatever it takes to defend our right as a human family to a climate safe world. And having your partnership, Nina, having the partnership of others around this chair and in this room to help us think about how we get resources to them, how we elevate them, could be the difference between their life and death, but also will be the difference between whether we win in 2030 to keep within 1.5 degrees or whether we forfeit the human future on this planet. So please, let's work together. I'm already rejoicing at the humanity you've always shown and look forward to continuing partnership with you. So however you want to partner, if you want to do in-country meetings, however you want to help us, you want us to help you with your accountability framework, whether it's with implementation, whether it's with direct grants, we're ready, we're here, and we're going to be solidly beside you so we can walk together to that finish line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hafsat. I think that was really energizing and kind of bringing the human perspective to all of this. And when you were talking about the matter of life and death for activists, I think this work is the matter of life and death for all of us, for the planet. I think we're not thinking enough about it, sitting in comfortable air-conned offices and kind of think that it doesn't touch us that directly. So thank you so much for bringing this like really, really direct, really human perspective to it. And so now, and I think our vision for really strengthening and focusing on women leadership and bringing those partnerships, and how do we bring the women leadership frameworks, but how do we then involve them in the World Bank implemented projects, and this is the vision, and I think we're all working towards that. But how do we make more of that $12 billion that we have flowing towards women? And here the idea of the KPIs, the key performance indicators and allocations, is very, very powerful, and that's why I have a lot of belief and passion for the 2X challenge. And I would like to invite Eleanor Ripple, who is the climate associate with 2X Global, to talk a little bit to explain to those who don't know about it, but also kind of the vision going forward, the renewed commitment to it. Over to you, Eleanor.
Thanks so much, Nina, and thank you to all of you for being here and for your incredible interventions. Yeah, that just really sit powerfully with me. And when you sort of do this work, I mean, we 2X Global, for those of you who don't know, are a field building and membership organization, really working with the entire investment ecosystem to change or shift mindsets and markets towards gender lens investing. And so these stories are really why we do what we do, and really why, day in and day out, we keep fighting for this fight. And it's been just really powerful being at the Sculp and seeing what's moving and what's not moving and where the mindsets are. But, to go back to your question, Nina, so we were set up in 2018 with the 2X Challenge, essentially a group of the major DFIs coming together at the G7 to commit to investing $3 billion with a gender lens. And that was huge. That was unprecedented. To this day, now in 2024, we have invested over $34 billion in gender lens investing, which is incredible and great, but we really need to be talking trillions to be making a difference. And so this year, we've come out with a new 2X challenge for the next 3 years to invest a new $20 billion in with a gender lens. And so now we've opened it up to beyond just DFIs, funds, businesses, to really ensure that this is an entire ecosystem platform. And I'd really sort of wanted to dive into, what the 2X challenge is and specifically what the criteria are, because I know, organizations like CIF are using these, and it's been voluntarily used up to now, and it has become a global standard in gender lens investing. And, we've tried to make it as simple as possible because we know that so many of these frameworks are so convoluted, even for example, in climate, the language that we use is so different regarding, who you speak to and what organization you are. And so we came up with this criteria back in 2018 to sort of support the 2X challenge. And we've now updated it this year to sort of reflect where the market is at and how the investors have been using it over a while. So you see on the screen, we have a little diagram. There's also a QR code for you to learn more. And we do have a reference guide that sort of helps investors, depending on the sector and the geography that they operate in, to really understand how they can invest with a gender lens and what the criteria thresholds are for that specific country. So that's a big change that we made, is really seeing, the variability within sector and country is huge. And so making sure that we don't just have one standard for everybody, making it more flexible. So there's really 5 or 6, I should say, main criteria that we look at. And this is really used, you know, when you're looking to make an investment, to say that you're 2x aligned and therefore can be part of the 2x challenge if you do meet one or ideally more of these criteria. The first one is on entrepreneurship and ownership. So ensuring that either, you know, the share of ownership of the company is at least 51% women, or that the business has been founded by a woman, at least sort of half of the business founded by a woman. The second thing, you know, a theme that's come up and I know really central to climate investment funds is on leadership. So the share of women leadership in boards, as well as a share in leadership in management. And so again, this is a threshold that varies based on climate, based on sector and on geographies. And we have an interactive tool as well online where you can sort of see, you know, input your country and your sector and see what the thresholds are specifically. We also have one on employment. So looking at, you know, the commitment to women working in the workforce, how many of these women, you know, how many of the workforce are women, as well as we need one quality employment criteria to count as, you know, you have met this employment criteria. We also are looking at supply chains, you know, how many women are part of the entire supply chain and value chain, as well as one sort of quality supply chain commitment. Finally, we have products and services. So, you know, are the products or services that you are sort of investing in or that the company is striving for, are those aimed at or, you know, being directed directly to locally led solutions led by women, or are these impacting women in a positive way? And I think this goes back, you know, to what we've been saying. You really need to ensure that the money is going to locally led action on the ground. And this is sort of, you know, one way that you can see that. And then we have some different thresholds for, you know, the portfolio. So whether you're a fund or whether you're a financial institution, sort of looking at that as well. And, you know, there's more information. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty of this, but I will say as well that we've recently in September just launched our 2X criteria. And so talking about accountability, talking about measurement, you know, we absolutely need that data. Yes, we need sex disaggregated data, but we really need to go beyond that. That is bare minimum. The 2X criteria is bare minimum. And, you know, we really need to keep pushing. And so we created the 2X criteria to ensure transparency and accountability for organizations. And this is third-party verified. So you have an accountability, you know, everything will be sort of reviewed, not by 2X Global, but by a third party to ensure that really you are committing to this. And, you know, the more people sign on to this, the more it'll become, again, a globally recognized standard, and the more we'll sort of go on to that. So I'd encourage all of you to you know, read the 2X criteria and involve that. And I know that CIF is, you know, trying to make that a mandatory requirement, which again is sort of the floor. And we always want to reach for the ceiling. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Eleanor. And really, it's you know, we look at it, and still not many organizations are subscribing to the criteria. But when you look in detail, that should be a standard operating practice for any business. I am very proud to say that we have some new investment plans that include the criteria as one of the conditionalities for the private sector funding for the new program that we just launched on industry decarbonization. We're also included it into the design language, and we're now discussing with the 2X various ideas on capacity building and kind of technical assistance to really push this agenda. So now we are lucky to actually have managed to get somebody from the UNFCCC, considering how busy they are with the negotiations. And we have Fleur Newman, who leads the gender and inclusion and engagement agenda at the UNFCCC Secretariat, to share some insights now that you've had a chance to hear a little bit about our discussions and themes. How does this align with the conversation on the Lima work program and some insights on the negotiations? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm here, and I've sent my team to do the other things that need to be done this morning. And I'm here because this is so important. And it's been a really energizing panel for me, because we are in amongst the negotiations, which can be quite challenging, and different perspectives. And it can be easy in those rooms to lose sight of what it is that you're trying to achieve. And hearing all of this, this is what, I wonder, I had thought that at one point that what we needed to do was release puppies into the room to change people's view of how things are, but maybe we need to have panels in the room talking about these things as interjections between the negotiations, because reminding people about what is happening on the ground, and that's why they're in the room negotiating is such an important piece. And it's one of the reasons why having this space is also important to complement what's happening in the negotiations. I'm not going to speak to the actual negotiations themselves because they're still ongoing. But one thing I would say is that whatever happens here, what happens on the ground has to keep happening, because the international process is a push-pull. Sometimes it's the international process that sets the agenda and sets the standard and the goal for national action and to send signals. Sometimes it's what's happening at a national level or on the ground that's coming back into the international process that pushes the international process a little bit further. That whole going from here to here on gender transformative, that's a really important, that the international process isn't yet ready for gender transformative, but in part that's because it's not well understood. So one of the things that can happen is that if it's delivered and it's delivered on the ground and we communicate what happens with transformative, then that information can come back into the international process and that then can move us forward. So it's a symbiotic relationship, well, sometimes not so symbiotic, but push-pull relationship between the international and the national process. And there was another piece about systems. This, when talking about what happens when you go into, you know, the story of going into an existing patriarchal structure and trying to change it from inside is always going to be challenging. But we're kind of needing to change the system from within whilst we're also creating a new system. And that is really, really challenging. And solidarity is more and more important, but so is bringing together unlikely combinations of people. We have to do things differently. We can't keep doing the same things and expect a different outcome. So part of this is about how we bring these partnerships together. And this is why it was so important for me, because I think what the CIF is doing is incredibly important. What the others are doing is also important, and what 2X Global is doing is important, but coming together and being able to communicate that is also important. So I just look forward to us all continuing to demonstrate what transformative looks like, and looking forward to engaging with everyone going forward. Thank you.
Really great. And I think we're running towards the end of our session, but we have one more intervention. We are also lucky to have with us Hayley Campbell, who is the co-executive director at the Care About Climate, and she's also an advisor to the Marshall Islands, and she's following the negotiations on the gender items.
All right, thank you all so much for having me to give some closing remarks. It's so fitting, young woman at the end, wrap it up. And yeah, I just want to kind of reflect on a couple of the things that were mentioned. I have been following the negotiations, and though I don't speak for the Marshall Islands in this capacity or really can share too much, we also have seen a lot of the things that have been in the news and the reports that there are concerns of backsliding on gender and transitioning away from the efforts that have been made to enhance efforts to have gender responsive, not just finance, but in general climate action. And so as we are sitting in this room, there are currently right now ministers, people from the presidency working to negotiate a much more compromise in the text, I would say. And so we're going to see what that happens. But what I think is most important in these negotiations, and why it's important to have everyone here, is that sometimes we need to go outside of these rooms, and it doesn't necessarily matter what has been agreed. There's an opportunity to be transformative, to take a step ahead, to be ambitious, to take the action that we know is necessary based not only on the science, but also on our lived experiences. And for me, as a young woman that adopted a nonprofit that now primarily has young women as volunteers from 50 different countries around the world. We're operating to help close the gender gap in NDCs. We have an NDC equity tracker where young women have now been trained on their national climate commitments and provided recommendations on how they can improve the intersection of gender and intergenerational justice in them. And that's a really transformative experience for young people because these climate commitments are the pillar, are the keystone of what we can look to have that gender transformative climate action that we're all seeking. And so when those things are inclusive and acknowledging the role of women and girls, they also are a lot more ambitious. And so these are the types of projects in the communities that I'm trying to help build up in my work at Care About Climate and the work that I'm hearing from all of you. And so that leads me to the last point on scaling. We heard a lot about the importance of unique partnerships from Fleur, of scaling. A lot of times finance, at least for us, I'm writing 40 grants a year and I maybe get one, you know? And on top of that, as a young person that also has another job, right? Trying to figure out how to thrive in the world that is the economy that we have right now. It's really, really hard for a lot of us to figure that out. Most of the grant, 20%, I've been told, only 20% of your funding should come from grants. That's almost all of our funding right now. And so I think those transformative partnerships to help get money into these communities, into these local grassroots orgs that maybe aren't part of these big institutions or know how to access them, especially groups also working in nature-based solutions, as we've heard, is really, really, really important. And so I guess my call to action for everyone here is, regardless of what's happening on the gender negotiations, we have a real opportunity to advance a lot of gender transformative climate action in our work, in our communities. And I encourage everyone to think right now, if you had $100,000, everyone probably knows a young woman in their community that could really do a lot with that money. And so thinking about that as we're implementing our funded solutions, I think would make a really big impact. So thank y'all.
So much, Haley. And thank you so much to really an amazing panel, amazing discussion. I mean, for us, I think with all the partners, it's part of the ongoing bilateral conversation in how we take the strategy forward. And we, with each one of them, especially with UNFCCC, will be reaching out with drafts and ideas on the strategy and kind of following up on specific ideas for collaboration. For those who were listening to us online, because we were live streamed, we have some Google Forms open that we would also really like to collect some inputs from you as well. So it's a little bit more interactive. And I think we're wrapping up here. I don't think we have a lot of, seeing we had a large panel, we don't necessarily have the chance to go for another round of comments. But I think we can continue the conversation a little bit more offline. If there are some burning comments, I think Cecile really deserve a second go.
Very much. Just thank you. Just a last comment to say that there are processes that are working very well on the ground now. If we really want to support women leadership, as I heard, we want to support health, we want to support education, we have to support access to technology. Please refer also to W+ standard that has shown that that is possible. We can use W+ standard to measure leadership, to measure education, health, economic transformation of women on the ground. We made it, we use it, and it makes great impact on the communities. Use it, and I'm sure that is a good tool that will help us to measure what we are doing. Because I think we have to shift from measuring the result to measuring the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecile. It actually gave me an idea. There were a lot of different resources that were mentioned during the conversation. So when our comms team is helping us to write a post about this and use social media, we'll compile all the resources, references to World Bank documents, to various tools. I think that would be also very useful, and to those who are listening to us online. So even this discussion between really different stakeholders and looking at the pieces of work that everyone is doing could be very enriching. Thank you so much once again.